We're live, so whatever you want, go.
Okay. I just realized today is Thursday, December 18th, right?
All right, it's a day.
I'm not working tomorrow, right? And I don't work Mondays,
Mhm.
period. And next week is Christmas. So I'm not working the 24th or the 25th, which is Wednesday and Thursday. And so next week I only got to work Tuesday and Friday.
Nah. I think I
Right,
took Friday
Christmas
off.
is in
I don't
the-
remember.
Right. Christmas is in the middle of the week, which means also, because by math, right? New Year's is in the middle, same exact is 7 days away.
Yep.
24 plus 7 is 31, right? New Year's Eve is on the 31st, and New Year's Day is on the 1st. And so the following week, I'm going to be working Tuesday and Friday. So I got two. I only have 4 days. Next week, Tuesday, Friday. The week after that, Tuesday, Friday. And the week after that, right? I don't work Monday ever, right? I'll work Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, we're going to MagFest.
Yep.
And I'm so not working then. So between now and like MagFest, I only have to work 5 days, 3 Tuesdays and 2 Fridays. And immediately after, well, actually not even after MagFest, during MagFest on Sunday morning, I have to go on a work trip to the other side of the country. Right. So I guess technically I'll be working, but not the normal kind of working.
Yeah.
Right? And I won't be back to normal until January 20th, which is after Martin Luther King Day, which is Monday, which I wouldn't work anyway.
A bunch of people on my team and my boss are going to London that week. So today they're like, "Oh, you want to come to London? You probably should." So that specific week.
I'm just saying, today's December 18th. It's not even the 20th. So
Yeah.
it's like more than the next month worth of time. I'm kind of only working like 5 days.
Yeah.
Right? I only have like 5 normal working days for like the next entire month. And that's only costing me PTO-wise like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. Well, I gotta get cracking on a few other things because we gotta.
Things are about to get very weird for over a month. Unusual.
Well, maybe we'll do. I don't know what we'll do about Geek Nights during all that. We'll just do episodes when we can. Is the best we can say. But at least our cup's going to overflow with because we have a lot. I mean, I have a panel from PAX East that I didn't get online yet because I was avoiding it because I had to do a bunch of stabilization, which I just did. So now I'll have that up soon. I got to come by your place at some point to get the video from the PAX we were just at. So I got that panel to put up. And then at MagFest, we're going to be doing 2 brand new panels alongside everything else, which means we got to finish writing the spectator panel, which we have a lot of notes about, but we never actually turned into a talk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyway, I guess we can dive right into it. It's the GeekNights Book Club. We tend to not talk about news and things of the day and all that nonsense. And if you are unfamiliar, GeekNights is a podcast which you are listening to. And that's what this is. But we've been doing a book club for a very long time on GeekNights. And even though we don't do that many books
we have done in the book club is not really proportional to the amount of time we've been doing the book club.
But it is a lot of books. I was scrolling back through because
it's added up because of the time. But
yeah, 20 years of GeekNights, even if we sporadically do it, that's going to be a lot of books.
I think we've been doing it better lately, which I'm actually going to credit the past few years after I basically deleted all social medias. That has increased the book reading.
Yep. I feel like the other thing that helped was we hit a wall. And partly due to our own obstinate, always read the unabridged version of anything. And then we read the unabridged Tale of Genji, which was fine. But that took a while for a bunch of reasons that we did not have to grapple with previously. Usually we read fast, even big, long books.
That's true.
I still got to pick my 2. I got one of the 2 books I'm going to offer for the next one picked, but I haven't picked the second one yet, so I won't do my announcement.
I thought of an idea for the next time.
Oh.
Anyway, so we're going to talk about this book?
Yes. So the book now, Scott's choice. And I'll just tell you right now, if you have not read this book, you probably shouldn't listen to this because it's a book club. We are talking about this book as though you have read it. It is a conversation between me and Scott about this book. So if you have not read the book, you might be kind of lost. And I'd recommend you just stop listening to this and go read this book because it's phenomenal. Also, content warning. It's going to fuck you up in a lot of ways. It's a really, really uncomfortable book.
But that's also, I think, the most uncomfortable books, I think, are the most essential. Right?
Oh, I would agree.
Yeah. So this book, just to reiterate, because for anyone who didn't listen to the book announcement or any of the meta moments, what happened was this book called I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman was originally published in 1990 something, right? 1995. Okay. And did not receive wide acclaim. It was not a bestseller. It was not a huge hit. It didn't win a Pulitzer Prize or any kind of prize that I know of or anything, right? And I didn't know about it either, right? It was a book in French, in the French language, which I do not speak or write, but I could, because there's Latin roots, I could kind of maybe understand something. But no, I cannot read a book in French, even elementary school French. So
though the title is a literal, direct, straight translation. Moi qui n'ai pas connu les hommes.
Yes. And but what happened was, thanks to TikTok, where, for whatever we're going to say about TikTok, doesn't need to be said right now, there is a community on TikTok of people who like to read books, and they make TikToks about books. And this book got very popular on so-called book talk. Now, I do not use TikTok at all, right? Yep. But yet, the hype for the book on the book talk, where I do not go, I have not gone to that website or opened that app in years.
Probably. I don't even have an account.
Yeah. I don't have an account either. I would always go to there was one person I looked at their TikToks, but they stopped posting them, and I was going anonymously without logging in. Anyway, the hype was so vast on Book Talk that I heard about it, despite not being it. Right? It would be like, could you imagine something getting so much hype amongst the Geek Nights listeners that people who don't know what Geek Nights is heard about the hype, but not about Geek Nights, right? Without ever listening to us or coming to our community. So when a hype is that strong, I make note. I just made note that the book existed, right? And that was all right. And then when I was looking for a book to read, I went to the library where I've been going. Actually, my library closed and isn't going to reopen until 2029. I have to go to a different branch. Anyway, and I noticed there was a waiting list for the book that was very, very, very long. Very long. I still would not have a copy now if I had gotten in that line then.
Yeah.
It's almost a guarantee.
Yep, I noticed that. I did end up buying it.
Because everyone in that line could have been able to keep that book for weeks at a time, right? And there were only so many copies. Oh, the library might have acquired more. That's a possibility. Anyway, so I didn't even bother getting in that line. But I also did not go and buy the book, right, on the internet or whatever, even though I could have. There were copies available. And then I was in an independent bookstore just by chance because I was waiting. And I said, you know what? I'm going to walk around this independent bookstore and I'm going to look at the books and all the staff recommendations.
The one in LIC, kind of by the TJs?
Yeah,
that's a really good independent bookstore.
Oh, yeah, that place is way good. Actually, the basement where the kids section is like the best if you need presents for children.
Oh, yeah.
It's better than any toy store, anything.
No, that bookstore is great.
Yeah. So, and there's definitely weebs working there because there's mangas in the back.
Yeah, and the recommendations from the staff are really good.
Anyway, I went through and I'm making notes of all the books going on in there, right? Not to buy them at the store because obviously it's an independent bookstore. It's expensive. But I know you're supposed to shop it. But then I saw this book and I'm like, wait a minute. That's the book with the long line at the library. And there is exactly one copy here.
Yeah.
And I also must say, I was in that bookstore just a few days ago. There were 0 copies of this book in the bookstore.
Ah.
So, at least none that I saw. So I may have bought their last copy. I saw it and there was one. And I'm like, this is clearly a sign. Clearly a sign. Must buy this book.
Yeah.
And so I bought the book. And then I read the book and I said, well, damn. Maybe the TikTok people are onto something, right? Maybe even though the platform not worth talking about right now, has issues, clearly the community of book reading people on TikTok,
well, what I will say
they have value.
A relevant aside, because there's a political theorist recently who was talking about how if you want to influence American culture, excluding very old people and very online people, TikTok is really the only way to go. Like, that's the only thing that penetrates the culture right now in a mass form among the youth.
Yeah. Anyway, this book, I Who Have Never Known Men. Well, that title is very literal.
Yep.
You think a title like that could be metaphorical in some way, right?
And
it's like, no, this is a story about a person who never knew any men.
And it's so zoomed in its focus and so sparse in what it gives you to work with that it felt very notable. Like, it stuck with me more than even a very similar story, because I've read other stories that have a lot of the same concepts that occur in this, but the way it is presented, the gaze from which you view the world through the eyes of the protagonist, and the framing and the thinness of it just give it this extra quality. Like, there's a lot to unpack about what's going on in this book.
Yeah, so it's a dystopian sci-fi novel, right? Of which there are aplenty.
Yep.
Right? But this one, I said this, I think, before also, it feels like even though it's from 1995, it feels like it's just among the classics from the earlier decades.
Oh, if you told
right?
me this was contemporary to Foundation, I would have assumed that's correct.
Yeah, it's like this is up there with the Brave New Worlds, which is really old, right? Or the 1984s or the Fahrenheit 451s or any of those, right? It's one of those. You could have told me it's as old as those books and I would have believed you, right? And I find that really interesting because you can sort of tell when you read most books, it's like, even if they're, it's not like, movies where I personally believe, like, some decades are better at movies than others, right? Some time periods. Whereas, the quality of books is, kind of the same always. It's just how many, right? But if you read a book from the year 2025, it feels like a book from the year 2025. This does not give away anything about when it was written at all, other than, I guess, it had to be the 20th century, I guess. It couldn't be earlier than that, but...
Unless it was...
There's things like vehicles, right, in the book.
But to be fair, there are works of writing from earlier eras that science fiction purport and invents technology that ends up existing later but did not exist at the time.
Yeah, but they would always have like the wrong name for something, or it would be like the Jetsons, right, where it's like a little off,
But there's some very important context, I think, about why this book feels so timeless, because the author, Jacqueline Harpman, was born in 1929 in Belgium. And thus, I'm going to quote the Wikipedia here. Her father was a Dutch-born Jew, so Hartman's family fled to Casablanca when the Nazis invaded during World War II. She was forbidden from attending French school due to her Jewish origins, and basically was one of the many people who had to flee the Nazis. And that's pretty important context to what this book is about.
Successfully running away is good.
Yep. So I guess what I'd say is what struck me the most about this book, just to dive right in, is because you see things through the eyes of the protagonist who literally it's not never known men. You could arguably also construe it as having never known man, because this is a person who has never known human society in any way. They are operating from first principles, and thus you as the reader are also operating from first principles, because you are given nothing that this character is not given about what this world is like. You can't even visualize most of what is happening. You're given so little. So as a result, you're disembodied from the world in the very literal way that this character is, and you're trying to construct a reality from the scant pieces of information you get, which is literally the ordeal this character is going through.
Yes, but the scant, information you get, at least about what happens, what the society was like before the prison time, right? Yep. And I guess we didn't explain that, but we're presuming you've read the book. Is basically they're saying, it was 20th century, war Earth, modernized society, right? And it's like, but if you yourself did not experience the 20th century world of society that existed,
Yep.
then this book would be really difficult to read, right? Because like, what would you would basically not really understand that sort of implied context that so little words are spent describing, because the book makes an assumption that the reader knows about the real world that we're in.
But at the same time, those assumptions are colored by the fact that a lot of things are described by the protagonist in her head in a way that it's not obvious what she has encountered at first in many instances, because she describes what she sees or interacts with instead of calling it what it is. You get a few asides of how she's learned later what something was, like that bus, but by and large, doesn't know what things are and thus doesn't point out things that would exist. So a lot of the context you have about the world is really solely around a vague pastiche of there was a society where people went to school and danced and lived lives and had jobs and went to school. And then there was a war and now we're here.
Right. And that, I think, is, the book has, like most sci-fi novels, right? There's like usually a few main points, or there's one big main point, and then lots and lots of other social commentaries, like all constantly throughout, right? But that point about the main character, with no name, by the way, they're doing the old main character no name thing for your self-insert possibly, or for whatever other reason, right? Or to make anyone be able to relate to them more easily, because it's also told in the first person as well, right? But I guess the one quote in the book that sort of like sums up that, major theme is where she's like, I want to know everything there is to know, not because it's any use, but for the pleasure of knowing. And now I demand you teach me everything you know, even if I'll never be able to use it.
Yeah, because the other women are broadly cruel to her, but you can understand why they are the way they are, considering the circumstance.
They're a little tired.
Yep. But they've got this kid and they don't know what to do with this kid. And like, if you've been trapped here so long that you expect the world is just like this forever, what is anyone going to do with knowledge about anything? Like, what would be the point of even explaining what society was like? And you can see how someone could fall into that trap of despair, considering the circumstance.
Well, I think also you look at the society that we're in, right, where our society still exists, and there's so many people, hopefully not GeekNights listeners, right, who are so incurious, right, and uninterested in, learning things, right? And so it's a situation here where people, I guess the book could be arguing, right, is that that's not a natural state for humanity, that our society pre-prison, right, made those women that way, and here we have a person who is untainted by it, and look, the curiosity is here again.
I mean, case in point, when they escape the prison, she just wants to explore as fast and far as possible to figure out what's going on and what the world is, right. And she spends basically decades broadly not doing that because the other women don't want to, and she feels a broad obligation to them and helps them out. And
also the need for survival as well, right?
But also, it's pretty clear by herself, because she was the youngest, she is much more fit and capable than everyone else for a lot of reasons. So she could go faster and farther, but she did sort of, to a degree, hold herself back to stay with the women far longer than she needed to.
Yes, and so that goes to the second big point of the book, obviously, is that it's a feminist work, right?
Yes.
And so that is the obvious metaphor for when you look at the world, especially a 20th century world, or especially the world of someone who was born in 1920-something, right? Where it's like, oh, the women sure would like to go out and become educated and explore the world. But instead, they stay home and take care of the family out of some sense of obligation, or that's what they're supposed to be doing, right? And then then they're old, right? Oops. Right? And I think that's really, throughout the book, right? It's in the title, right? Not knowing men, right? Even though, as Vern pointed out, it is also a story about not knowing man. But when it comes to the men, the only men in the book are those guards who don't say anything, right? I think they're only there really because of the, just to establish the situation, right? And it's a lot of what happens, right, is, the way the women, behave together, right, what they do when they get out. And it's like, if you're someone who's lived in our society, which is the intended audience for this book, and you just think, what if there was even like one man, one penis amongst this group, right? Everything changes, right?
Yeah.
Are they making the decisions they make? Are they doing all these things peaceably? It's like, no. The way the women get along, it's talking about, right, the nature of, right, men and women in our society, right, and how they behave and how they think and how they get along, and the society, everything, right?
But then it zooms out a little bit, because I feel like a few poignant moments are then when they find the first other prison, and it's the same. There's women and they're dead and the men are gone, and they find another one and they're all the same. But then they start finding prisons where there are men in the cage, but they're all dead, and there's no guards and everything's gone, and they're eventually realizing they are alone. I think what helps that that whole section feels dreamlike, and I think it's partly because the environment they're described as being in is so alien that they almost start to wonder if they have been put on a different planet. Seriously, like they seriously debate this, and they may have been.
As the reader, right? You imagine that,
because they travel far enough to where the nature of the environment they are in feels off. It's too uniform. There's too little. There's nothing in any direction.
And they weren't in that prison for that long, right? Because, right, the girl, right, clearly wasn't born in the prison, right?
Yep.
And how old is she, the main character, at the start of the book, right? Not even like a teenager yet, really.
Like she's just prepubescent.
Right. So it has to be like maybe a little over a decade that they were in the prison. And yet, like, how could the entire Earth, if they were still on Earth, be completely redone in that time? Right. It's like they don't encounter cities or towns or any remnants of, the past civilization.
They don't really encounter wildlife.
No.
Like, they don't encounter anything except identical cages where they were just lucky enough to escape, because the first thing that happened in that entire time that was different happened to happen at the exact moment that let them free and condemned everyone else to death. Also, the fact that the guards disappeared so quickly and in such a panic when that alarm went off, and yet there was not a trace of them. Mm-hmm. There's a deep mystery. Why does the power stay on? And even to the point to where you get a note from the protagonist where she's like, the other women kept talking about a power plant, but I didn't know what that was. They kept talking about how maybe we could find it and learn more, but she didn't really understand enough to even try to do that, to find cables or something connecting these facilities together.
Yep.
But
I mean, the mystery of the book is definitely, especially for someone like me, I love the terrible secret of space.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And it's definitely, compelling you just sort of, as a story-wise.
You
right?
want to know as badly as she wants to know anything. Like, this book is, the pace of the book is basically nothing is happening. Nothing new can happen. It's a very zoomed in world. And anytime anything happens from an external source, it's almost like you paused reading like, holy shit, something happened.
Something happened.
A bus full of guys? What the fuck?
Exactly.
And that moment then is blunted by the fact that you don't ever find anything again after that. Like, after that bus, you find maybe one other thing in the whole book.
Yeah, I mean, think about, say, like a video game, right? You look at a video game like, say,
Fallout,
Breath of the Wild, right?
Fallout,
where you're walking around in this big space you can explore, right? And to make the game fun and rich, it's chock full of stuff. Like, you can't walk 2 feet without falling over a Korok.
Yeah.
Right. Now, imagine if like you have this huge map and there's like 2 things on it, but it's like. And it takes you forever to walk, and eventually, like, you're not even sure if there's anything out there. It's like Desert Bus, right? Yeah. And suddenly, you actually see something. It's like, holy crap, something, right?
So
That's what this book is like.
So what I think this book is really about at its core, not disregarding the feminist readings, I think those are valid and true, but I think it also leads on a really deeper point about first principles and this idea that there's just us. Like, there's only humans. There's no jailers around humanity. Anything that humans do to other humans is just humans doing it to other humans. That is a choice collectively by the people that exist, and there's no outside force or outside power other than the planet we're on and physics. So, in this book, the guards, and the protagonist even interrogates this later in the book, were the guards also victims? What were they doing and why? The guard, like... And this really comes to a head when she finds the first prison where it's a bunch of men dead in the cell. Because at that point, the question is, what happened to the jailers? Were they even different from the people in the cages? Why were they even going through these motions if there's nothing else? Like, they didn't have books, they didn't have literature, they didn't even have a deck of cards among them. The jailers also had nothing. Why were they doing what they were doing? There appeared to be no coercive force anywhere. So humans make their own prisons for themselves. And that's very close to a lot of what I'm going to make a really wild reference here. Big O is about. The anime.
I'm going off with the Big O.
In that ultimately, Big O presents a world where people are fulfilling these roles in society, but there's a mystery of what happened before. Everyone lost their memories, and now we just have this world to interact with no context of where it came from. And yet, humans start filling roles and doing good and horrible things to each other. And it kind of makes this point that there never will be an external context. And this book is the same way. You will never find the answer to what you should do. You will never find the answer to why anything happens. And anything that humans do, humans chose to do on their own. That the humans built those prisons and put themselves in them. That the jailers effectively jailed themselves.
Well, maybe. I think, what can't be overlooked is, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs is, whatever, right? But just as a thing to think about, right? The pyramid of, right? Where it's like, yeah, you got to survive. But then once survival is taken care of, well, that now you're looking for self-actualization, etc., right? And so in the beginning of the book, in the prison, right? Even though it's not great, it's a prison, right? All of the foundational needs are sort of taken care of, right?
Which leaves you hollow because there is nothing else you can ever achieve or do. That is almost a fate worse than death, as the characters routinely talk about.
Right. It's like
they're not even allowed to commit suicide.
Right. Their physiological needs are taken care of. And while they're in prison, they're safe from harm. They're going to live until they die in the prison, right? And then it's like, well, what about, love, education?
They're not allowed to touch each other. There's nothing but food and pissing and shitting and dying.
Right. And then as soon as they get out, right, it's like, aha, well, now all of those other things, right, they can actually sort of have for free, right? All your, at least, there's not many resources available for education, but it's like, they won't get in trouble at least for, touching each other or anything of that nature, right? But now they have to work, right? Because their physiological needs, they're not safe, right? They'll die very quickly without food and water. And suddenly now they have to do all those other things.
Though with an interesting caveat that these shelters and this infinite power source that exists somewhere keeping everything running, they do effectively have unlimited food and shelter if they want it.
No, but they do have to work for it, right? It's not.
They really wouldn't have to if they stayed right near one of those facilities. There's unlimited food in that freezer.
Well, it's not unlimited.
It's effectively unlimited.
It's better than. They still had to do something, right? It's not like before where they had to do nothing.
Yep.
Well, they did do some in the prison. They did do like some amount of cooking, right?
Yep.
Even though it wasn't, and sewing and things like that, but not much.
And it shows how they seek out challenges wherever they can. They seek out any reason to have a conversation, to pull any agency from this agency-less world that they're forced to inhabit. What's most stark is the idea that the guards do not interact with them at all, except to enforce the unstated and unwritten rules. Especially, I just think a lot about how then you find that the guards themselves have nothing. There is nothing in their lockers. There is nothing anywhere. There's nothing anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's like, where were the guards living? What did the guards have?
Yep. Nothing changes for them either, except one day, one guard disappears.
The guards were clearly surviving, but did they have love or self-actualization of any kind, right?
Well, because they were also, that's why I get back to this first principles
thing. They did keep
thing.
pointing out the one guard who was younger than the others, but in all other respects was identical.
Yep. But that's why I get back to this idea of first principles and humans make their own cages, because even here, the three guards watch each other and make sure, like, they're clearly watching each other and the prisoners. There's never a moment where any guard would ever have the ability to have a conversation with a second guard without a third guard watching them, or a conversation with the women without two other guards watching them. So as a result, the guards are fully enforcing their own confinement as equal to confining the women. Like,
right.
nobody has anything.
Right. Well, we got to talk about the part where all the people start dying.
Yep.
Right. So obviously this goes on for a long time, and all the women, they
Time
die of old age
progresses so quickly in the book in this almost dreamlike state once they're outside building their little village and traveling around.
Yep. But yeah, obviously the book covers a time period long enough, right, that the women get sick or old or infirm or otherwise, right? And some of them just die. But then some of them, the main characters, sort of mercifully, right, kills them off after finally, like, agreeing to do so. And it's like it brings, the typical, I mean, we're just literally just like yesterday, the governor of New York signed or at least said she would. I don't know if she has actually signed it yet, but effectively she's going to sign this bill that allows for, under certain circumstances, people who want to die on purpose.
And remember, the women in this book, several of them tried to commit suicide and were prevented from doing so by the guards.
Right. And yet, here we have in the book, it's sort of the same discussion that we have in the real world. But the women in the book, other than the main character, have, some of the reasons that, we have, right? We have sort of moral teachings that we've been given in society by a religion or without religion, right? It's, killing people is wrong, murder is illegal, right? There's all sorts of people have lots of different feelings on this matter, right? And in the book, the main character doesn't have any of that, right? The main character didn't have moral teachings from anywhere, no education, no religion, no nothing.
Yep.
Right.
And thus the rituals of humanity and the strictures of human society are alien and meaningless to her.
But still, right, has sort of the same struggle, right, that is sort of, right. So the author is basically saying, trying to make a distinction between which parts of that are, from society and which parts of that are sort of, innate. We're like, yes, even a blank human, right, has these feelings about this matter, right?
Of course, then it confronts the bleakness of the women have to fully face the fact that unless something changes, they will all eventually die, and that's it. And there's nothing else. There's nothing permanent for them to do. There's no society to rebuild or even build. They just live out their lives together. Which arguably, between entropy and heat death and all that stuff, humanity arguably has to itself confront that just on a very long existential time frame. But the book doesn't, what do we get? We get the alarm going off. That's the first thing that happens from the outside. They live their lives for a while. She goes off on her own. She finds the bus. That tells a little more about the world. But even that is unsatisfying because it only raises... That bus raises an infinite number of questions compared to how many things it answers. And then she finds the shelter. And that's it. That's all there is in this book. She finds the best possible shelter on Earth as far as she can tell, but still no answers to anything. In fact, that shelter raises even more questions. Why wasn't there anyone in the shelter? Were the humans running the prisons for literally no reason?
I don't know. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
That's not what the book's about. It's just like
Big O, what happened before the cataclysm? It doesn't matter.
That's what makes, these sort of classic sci-fi novels, feel the way they do, is that, the author is trying to say something, even though it's science fiction and it takes place in some either alternate universe or future or some kind of different universe setting than reality, or some altered reality where the rules are different or something's different, right? Technology is more advanced or weird. It's really just trying to commentate on humans as they are in the real world, right? And the way they do this is you take humans as the author sees them, right? Human nature as the author sees it, and change something. And then, it's not a real scientific experiment because it's not actually being done. It's just a hypothesis of whoever's writing, right? Their imagination. But they show in their view, right, how the human, condition would be different if the situation is different. And that contrast, when the reader contrasts that against the real world that they've experienced, right, that's where the message is in a science fiction novel. Right? It's like, oh, what if there was, a horrible big brother? It's like, and people would behave like this. It's like, oh, and then 1984, you read it and that tells you, all right, so that's, the book is following that exact same science fiction framework, right? Where all that mystery is there to compel the reader to keep reading, for the reader to have their own curiosity to compare against the curiosity of the main character, right? Which is one of the main points of the book. And to just create the conditions unto which to compare the behavior of the characters in the book and how they cope with that scenario, and then to consider, that against real people, and then to ask yourself, well, what does that mean, right? If this author was correct, right? Because it's obvious it's not science, but what is the author trying to say about people that are real by showing and hypothesizing that people would behave this way in this scenario?
Yep. But it's just it is so important that you learn nothing about the world by the end of this book. Like, that is what makes this book work.
Right. Well, I mean, if there was an explanation, right?
If you learn
external,
anything, a helicopter flies by, like, oh, okay.
Right. If there was some explanation, then like, yes, it was aliens, right? Well, then it's no longer really telling you. I mean, it kind of is, but it changes. Now it's about the aliens. It's not about the people anymore.
Yeah, because I guess what this really it's really showing you a world where it's shining a light on the fact that there is no external context. There will always be an unknown because you can't know everything, and everything the humans are doing, we are doing solely in the context of ourselves. We don't have anyone else except the animals. And notice there's no animals in this book either. There's nothing. Yeah. There's just the women.
Because that would only make you start asking questions that aren't important.
Yep. Right? But I think it shows that now there is nothing to interact with in the universe like you in this book. You have nothing but yourselves, and it's the old adage: anything a man does to another man, they have done unto themselves.
Yeah. So I guess the most heavy-hitting line in the book is the one that's like, I was forced to acknowledge too late that I too had loved and was capable of suffering, and I was human after all. Right? So it's like, that being, like the sort of, it's almost at the end, I think she said.
I highlighted a few quotes. I just didn't open the app.
I don't know if she says it at the beginning also. I think because, the beginning sort of like starts with like a little introduction, right? Because it's sort of a Hobbit situation with a little, there and back again kind of deal, right? It's like you're reading the book that the main character wrote in that bunker, presumably you found it there.
Because the
right?
only act she can, the only thing she can do, the only thing she has agency over ultimately is what artifacts and legacy does she leave behind in the event that there are others.
Right. But the point of that quote is basically to be like, is the point of the book, which is like, all right, given the absence of society, right? She was forced to acknowledge too late that she had loved, was capable of suffering, right? And was human after all, right? So she didn't acknowledge it, early
While there were
enough,
still humans.
But society was not required for those things, right? The author is saying that those things, right, love, suffering, right, humanity, society is not required.
But
right?
it also then
those things are intrinsic in just being, alive.
But it thus heavily implies society can be any way we want it to be. It doesn't have to be the way it is. The women inside the cage, the society that put the women in the cage is clearly evil. Like, that is not okay. Society could have been different, but it wasn't.
Well, but also, those things which are, intrinsic to humanity, a person who has never known men will still experience them, right? But some kind of horrible society, right, can basically beat those things out of people.
I think it's pretty clear the women were not being routinely drugged as they hypothesized. I think that is just the tedium of such a cloistered existence.
Yeah. No, I don't think, that was just, the women, of course, right? They didn't put that much effort into it, or but, they, of course, would had some curiosity about, not as much as the main character, right? But they did ask some questions, to each other, but they obviously couldn't possibly ever have any answers, right?
Yep.
The only answers they had were, all the empty prisons they found, which only gave them more questions of like, how many of these are there?
Yep.
Right.
Because to the protagonist, then, human society consisted solely of those prisons.
Yep. Which are all separate.
Yep.
It's like, that's really right. You think about prisons in the real world, and it's like, yeah, they have wings, and but it's like, all of these were like individual, one cell each, and they're all over. There's tons of them, but separated by miles of emptiness. It's just, I think the imagination of the author to come up with that particular arrangement.
Well, that they find so many so fast, despite traveling on foot on a featureless plane with infinite mild weather that never changes. It's almost like a fugue plane.
Yeah.
It implies there is a density of these prisons.
Yep.
So yeah, this was one that'll stick with me. I think more people should read this book.
I mean, yeah, this is a book that I think, it's sort of
timely, prescient, important to our current moment in society, where perhaps we could choose.
It's mostly timeless, right? It hit hard in 2020, whatever year it got hot in. I don't know, some recent year, 2020X, even though it came from 1995, right? And you wouldn't have known. It could have been published for the first time, and people wouldn't have known that.
Yep.
That it was a 30-year-old book. And yeah, I think it's a book that really, can, for I think a lot of people, it will, damage you.
Yeah.
If you think about your own life, and, regardless of what kind of life you're living, whether, unless you're, I guess someone who doesn't know how to read or read properly, it might go over your head, like you're some evil billionaire or something. But anyone else.
Yeah. Well, it's like people who watch Evangelion and are like, well, what happened to the robot? Like, if it's that kind of person is going to read this book, and they'll be like, but where was the power plant?
Yeah. It's like, yeah, that's, you read, that's why you need to read more. That's not how books work.